Without further ado, I'll introduce you to Todd Botterill here, and he's going to talk to you about vertical tillage and general cultivation.
Hey everybody, thank you Kellen. Yes, my name's Todd Botterill of Botterill Sales. I'm an independent manufacturer's rep. I represent 8 different companies, and I think Kellen's got 7 of them, so we get to work with each other quite a bit. Just quickly, I wanted to thank Kellen and everybody at TriStar Farm Service for doing all the work to get this going today. We've got people cooking burgers here for lunch and that for us too. I want to really appreciate, I really appreciate Donnick's giving us the land to play on, because you can have all the toys in the world, but if you don't have a playhouse, it doesn't do you much good. And again, thank you to you guys for taking the time to come here. So I'm going to talk briefly on vertical tillage and on compaction issues. And vertical tillage has been a big part of my life now. I was selling vertical tillage before it was called vertical tillage. So where I was kind of fortunate, again, when I started with Phoenix Rotary Heroes, I was traveling down there with an agronomist named Ken Ferry. Started doing the first research with vertical tillage and started making it popular. At the beginning, we were just a flash in the pan. It was never going to take off, and all the big dogs laughed at us. Now all the big dogs are coming out with the vertical tillage machines. True vertical tillage is not a single machine, okay? Just because you go out and buy a Landau VT Plus, please buy a Landau VT Plus, but just because you buy one of those does not make you vertical tillage. Vertical tillage is all about having a consistent soil density down below your plant zone, or down below your seeding depth, okay? It has nothing to do about which way you move the dirt. You can move it sideways, up, down, really doesn't matter, as long as your soil densities are consistent, okay? So, to give you an idea what that means, when you run a field cultivator or a tandem disc, when they run through the ground, they drag through it, and the bottom of those sweeps and the back of the blades pack the ground down below where they run. So you're left with very fluffy dirt. And let's say with a field cultivator, normally you run them 3 to 4 inches deep, right? Well, you have 3 to 4 inches of nice fluffy dirt, and then you have that smear layer. So what happens is that root starts to develop in that nice fluffy soil, and it starts to grow down, and then it hits that smear layer that's created by the tillage tool. And it's now easier for the root to go sideways than it is to push down through, okay? It's not that it can't push down through, but it takes the path of least resistance, and it'll start going sideways until it finds a spot where it can start to grow down again. The other thing that layer does is that it prevents the capillary moisture movement upwards later on in the year. So Amanda was talking about how water moved and how there's capillary moisture movement. Basically with the cracks in the soil, if the surface gets dry, water will migrate up. Well, it hits that smear layer and all of a sudden it doesn't move up anymore. So whatever moisture your crop has to use that year is whatever the soil can hold down to the depth that you work to. So if you work 4 inches deep, you really only have 4 inches of moisture retention. And your roots, again, haven't grown down deep. They're typically in that 3 to 4 inch range. So what happens then is if you have a dry year, and I know a lot of you don't remember what that is, but when you have a dry season, now all of a sudden your crop doesn't grow down to the deeper moisture doesn't migrate up, and that's when you start to see a lot of yield effects. Now, right now, everybody thinks vertical tillage tools are for wet weather. True vertical tillage is actually about drought-proofing you, okay? And it's really got the best effects with very thirsty crops. Do we see huge yield advantages with crops like, cereals and beans and that? It's not huge. There is some effect, but it's not huge. Crops like corn, though, Farm Journal magazine found in over 8 years, over an 8-year study, on average 8 bushel an acre increase in yield. Now, it wasn't 8 bushels every year. What it was is, if they had consistent moisture, they'd have the same yield as conventional tillage. But when you had a dry year, they saw 25 bushel an acre jumps in yield in those years. So as it averaged out, it worked out to a little over 8 bushel an acre in corn yields. You're going to see the same sort of thing out here with your cereal crop. It's not ever going to hurt you, but especially when you have a wet spring and a dry summer, it's going to give your crop every opportunity it has to excel, okay? Now, like I said before, vertical tillage is a system. The first thing you have to do, and this is the step that most guys miss out on, is you have to go out and remove the tillage layers that are out there. Freezing and thawing does not remove them. okay? I've been out in the fields where we had fields that were no-tilled for 20 years. And they dug pits, and the guys who knew what they're looking for could see where the cultivator ran 20 years ago, where the plow had run before that. Those layers were still there. So you have to go in and actually remove them. That's where we have tools like a chisel plow with just spikes on it is a vertical tillage tool. We have a tool here like the Smart Till. We have the Blue Jet Sub-Tiller. Tools that'll go in there and remove all those tillage layers. And then you use these surface tillage tools. You know, units like the VT Plus, you know, there's a bunch of other guys out there, more the disc machines or coulter machines. Those machines are designed to work the ground without putting the layers back in. Okay? Now, if you just go and buy one of these machines and just run it, you're not vertical tillage, you're using it as a surface tillage tool. You're just using it to work up the surface. And that's why guys really like those machines right now, because they can go into wet conditions like this with tons of residue, slice, dice, marinate, and yeehaw, Bob's your uncle, life is good. But if you want to get the best bang for your buck out of these tools, I really suggest looking at the full picture of actually removing the layers that you have, so that way when it does turn dry, you're actually going to have that little bit of benefit that your neighbor doesn't have. And those are the years, I mean, really, when it's wet, if you can get out there, you can spread it on the surface, it'll grow. But when it's dry, you can't just go out there and make more water. So anything you can do to help moisture migration, moisture holding ability in that soil in the dry years is going to have a lot more benefit to you than just getting it to dry out in the wet years.